Hello, today we're going to talk about cumulative frequency graphs. So a cumulative frequency graph allows us to find the number of scores that lie above or below a certain value. So anytime we want to graph a cumulative frequency graph, we have to understand that we are going to plot the cumulative frequencies, and then we are going to connect those points with a smooth curve. So let's first talk about percentiles. So anytime we are talking about a percentile, we are talking about a number where a certain percentage of scores falls below that number. There is an easy way to remember what a percentile is. So for example, example of a percentile is, let's say you have a test score and they give you on a report that your test score is in the 75th percentile. That means that 75% of anyone who took that test or your class would have scored less than what you did. Okay. So if you are in the 15th percentile, that means that there are 15% of students that are lower than what you are. So the most common percentiles is the lower quartile, which is also the 25th percentile, the median, which is the 50th percentile, and the upper quartile, which is the 75th percentile. So let's look at an example here. It says a company has 180 employees, and the employee records summarizes their salaries below. So the first thing that they want us to do is they want us to complete the cumulative frequency table. So when we complete the cumulative frequency table, we are basically taking a running total. So we start off with a cumulative frequency of 8, and then we have to take 8 plus 13, and we get 21. And then we have to do 21 plus 19, which is 40. And then we do 40 plus 26, which is 66. And then we do 66 plus 32, which is 98. Then we do 98 plus 35, which is 133. And then we do 133 plus 20, which is going to be 153. Then we do 153 plus 13, which is 166. And then we add 10 to it, which is 176, and then add 4, which gives us 180 here. So this is my cumulative frequency. Anytime you get to the end of your cumulative frequency, that total should match the total that was given to you in the word problem prompt. So now I'm going to show you how to graph these points on the cumulative frequency graph. So anytime we plot points or graph a cumulative frequency chart, then we have to recognize how to plot the points. Anytime we plot our points on the cumulative frequency graph, we always go from the upper bound of the boundary. So I'm going to use these upper bound numbers here as my x values, and then the cumulative frequency will be my y values. For example, for the first row, for the salaries that are in between $10,000 and $15,000, I would plot this point as 15.8. For the last point, for the salaries between $55,000 and $60,000, I will plot this point as 6180 here. So let's do it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to label and scale your axis. So what we are going to do here, we already know that if we are in the bottom left-hand corner, that is 0, 0. We can see that we're going from 10 to 60. So I'm going to label my x-axis by tens. So anytime you have a graph here, you're going to have minor grid lines and major grid lines. Major grid lines are the lines that are in bold, they're darker. Minor grid lines are the lines that are very light or faint. Okay, so on my major grid lines of my x-axis, I am going to go by tens. My minor grid lines, however, are increasing by twos because I know that I have to count 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Okay, all I have to do now is I need to look at my cumulative frequency. My cumulative frequency needs to go all the way to 180. So in order to go to 180, I have 4 major grid lines here, and I am going to go by 45 here. So if I go 45, then I'm at 90, then I'm at 135, then I'm at 180. You can scale whatever you want to. You can scale by whatever you want to. If you wanted to go by 50s, you could have went by 50s, okay? Your points in your graph should still give you the same result. So now I want to start plotting these points, and I'm going to make sure that here when I label my axis, I'm going to make sure that I put that this is going to be my salary, and I know that my salary is already in thousands. And then I know that my y-axis is going to be my cumulative frequency here. So that's my cumulative frequency. All right, so now that I have that, I'm going to start plotting my points. So the first point that I want to plot is going to be 15.8. So in order to plot these points, remember, you have to understand what are you going by each time. My x-axis, I'm going by twos. Okay, I'm looking at my minor grid lines. I'm going by twos on my x, and for my y-axis, I'm going by nines. So if I want to plot 15.8, I go to 15, which is halfway in between 10 and 20, and then I plot and I go up to 8. So that point will end up being located here. Then the next point that we have is going to be at 2021. Remember, we use the lower bounds and then the cumulative frequency. So we have to plot 2021, which will be located here. And then we are going to plot 2540, which is here. Then we are going to plot 3066, which is here. And then we're going to plot 3598 here. Then 4133. Then 45, 153, and then 50, 166, and then 55, 176, and then finally 60 and 180. Once we do that, those are all of our points with our cumulative frequency. And then you always have to remember that at the very beginning, you are always going to start with 0, 0. Okay? Once we have all of these points plotted, we are then going to connect them with a smooth curve. Okay? As long as you have the points, your curve, just make it as smooth as you can. Okay, they will compensate for the accuracy portion on the exam. So now that we have this cumulative frequency graph, we can answer the following questions. So the first thing that they want us to do is they want us to use the graph to estimate the median salary. So I want to know what is the median or the middle salary that people are going to get. So if I look here, I know that my cumulative frequency is 180, which means that I have 180 people that I am dealing with. So I know that the median corresponds to the 50th percentile. So if the median corresponds with the 50th percentile, if I take 50% of 180, I will get 90. So all I have to do is go to 90 on the cumulative frequency, and then I trace my line over to the graph, and then I come down. So I am approximately going to be it's going to be a little bit below halfway. So instead of me being at about, if I'm going by twos, that's 30, 32, 34. Instead of me being about 35, it's a little bit below that. So I'm between 34 and 35. So I'm going to call this 34.5 here. That is my median. And remember, your salary is in thousands. So this is going to be approximately $34,500. That'll be the median salary here. Next, it says we want to find the number of employees with a salary below $22,000. So if I want to look for below $22,000, I need to go to $22,000 on my x-axis, which will put me here in green right beside the 20. And then I'm going to trace up to the graph. And then I am going to go over here, And then I end up seeing that this number will end up being 246, or excuse me, we're going by 9, so it's going to be 9, 18, and then 27, so that's 27 there. So make sure that you remember, if we go back and look at the table, we see that we include the lower bounds, but we do not include the upper bounds. That's why you see that we have less than or equal to's going down the left-hand side, and then we have less than's going down the right-hand side. So when we look at the 27, I know that that point where that 27 is, that is telling me that 27 employees, they make less than $22,000. Because remember, we always graph the upper bound and we do not include the upper bound. So the number of employees that make less than 22,000 is 27. All right. Next, we want to find the percentage of students with a salary that is above $58,000. So what I need to do here is I need to go to 58,000 on the x-axis, which is right before the 60. And then I'm going to draw my line going up, and I'm going to touch my line here, and then I'm going to draw my line going over, and I end up being about right here. So once I do that, I can see if I estimate it, I would estimate that to be approximately 178 here. So I know that there are 178 employees who make less than $58,000. However, I want to figure out the percentage of the employees that make above $58,000. So I would have to take 180, which is my total amount of employees, and then I would have to subtract 178, which will give me 2 employees that make above $158,000. So now what I'm going to do is, because I want to find the percentage, is I'm going to take 2 and divide it by 180, and I'm going to turn that into a percentage. So 2 divided by 180, and of course times 100, is going to give me approximately 1.11%. Okay, so only 1.11% of the employees make above $58,000. So the next part, I want to find my inner quartile range, which means I need to figure out what my Q1 and my Q2 is. So we need to remember that anytime we have our Q1 represents the 25th percentile. Our Q3 represents the 75th percentile. So I need to find those values on my y-axis for my cumulative frequency. So if I take 180 and I times it by 0.25, that will give me 45. So I need to go where the 45 is, and then I need to go over, and then I need to come down. So this salary here is going to be at 26,000 here. I'm going to do the same thing for the 75th percentile. So I have to do 180 times 0.75. And that is going to give me 135. So I go 135 here. And then I trace the line over. And then I am going to come down. So I am about right here. So I'm like about halfway. So that's halfway in between 40 and 42. So I'm going to say that that is approximately 41. All right. So I can basically say that my Q1 is actually going to be equal to 26,000, and my Q3 is going to be equal to about 41,000. All right. So now if I know I want to find my interquartile range, remember your interquartile range is your upper quartile subtract your lower quartile. So if I take 41,000 and I subtract 26,000, that is telling me that my interquartile range is 15,000. So that is my answer there. So last question is asking, what is the salary of an employee whose job is in the top, okay, in the top 15% of the employees at the job? Okay, so let me find another color. So if we say the top 15%, that means that if they're in the top 15%, that means that 85% of the employees make less than they do. So I'm going to look at the 85th percentile. All right. So when I do 0.85 times 180, I get 153. And I know that 153, if I do 135 plus 9 plus 9, that's 153. So I know 153 is here, is two units above 135. So when I go to that 153 here, I'm going to trace over, and then I'm going to touch my graph, and then I'm going to come down. All right, and you try to be as neat as possible. I would suggest when you're doing this, you want to have a straight edge or a ruler. All right, so here I would see that that is about halfway in between 44,000 and 46,000. So that puts me right about 45,000. Okay. So I will be able to say here that the salary of an employee whose salary is in the top 15% of the employees at the job will be approximately 45,000 or more, because it says what is the salary of anybody that's in the top 15%. So I know that they have to make 45,000 or more in order to be in that top 15%. Okay. So if you have any questions on cumulative frequency or cumulative frequency graphs, please let me know and have a great day.